Welcome to Portals of Perception and to Internal Human Orchestra Work, Episode 3. We have embarked on this journey and we are proceeding today to discover the next move we are about to make. Beth, Rita, Eleni, welcome. So let me get us started by grounding us in where we are. And just with a couple of slides, today we want to begin to make some moves into the working with polarities. To explain why and put it in context, let me first bring this slide, which we looked at in episode 1, where we painted some of the challenges that people grapple with that we are seeking to assist and offer easement through the IHOW process, the Internal Human Orchestra Work process. A sense of being disembodied, a sense of being disjointed, a sense of being energetically depleted, the sense of shrinking to a narrower range, and the sense of feeling stuck or trapped. And we said we will offer ways and protocols and practices to facilitate enhanced well-being, to bring greater orchestration and ease and integration of the body, mind, and soul, the physical, the magnetic, and the electric lives, to improve balance and harmony, to foster resilience, to enhance flow, and to integrate polarities, which is where we are heading into today, to make a beginning journey into what will likely lead us to several moves and several practices. What we experience, what we feel, our inner state, is a byproduct of all these dimensions, how we process and metabolize energy and the physiological dimension and the mind. So therefore, by definition, we can impact and shapeshift and alter our states through any of those portals. We can work with the physiological machinery to change our mental and mind state and energy state. We can do mental work to impact the energetic and the physiological. And we can do directly energetic work that will impact our mind and our physiology. So these are different ways of different pathways we apply, and we will over time explore to demonstrate that we can alter our state and how we feel through different pathways. So when in a different context, in a therapy context, a person comes into the clinic and the therapist, if they're using a cognitive methodology and pathway, they will teach the person they're working with that what they feel is often a byproduct of certain thoughts. Certain thoughts actually create a state and a feeling and an experience. And when a person is not aware that that is what is occurring with them, they identify with the thoughts and therefore then identify with the state of being whatever they feel. Part of what we are discovering in the internal orchestra of the human system is that we are not one instrument, we are many instruments. And we have the freedom and the capacity and the flexibility and the ease to travel to those different internal conditions, internal states, and use them rather than be captured by them. So Again, today we are seeking to lead into the way of managing polarities. And one of the dimensions of managing polarities that we are looking to sense into is the recognition that polarities are a natural part of living a life. This is a planet of dualities. We experience every day the natural flow through the day and the night, and the night is followed always by another day. And we experience through that the state of being awake and being asleep, and how we are impacted by light and darkness. Open our eyes, close our eyes. So we are forever, just as the way of naturally metabolizing the day, we are experiencing, and we never get locked into any one condition, which is what we are suggesting in the idea of integrating polarities in the way of living a life, because we use up energy and we then replenish energy. We inhale and we exhale. So these are natural processes that occur in us every moment, every day, in the way the heart is beating. So where is the problem? The problem is that through the living experience, we sometimes get into a surprise shock or surprise stress or surprise pain, and the nervous system gets contracted quickly. And we enter a contraction in a way that is not as regulating, such that we can move in and out of the contracted state. And so what we want today is to ease into some of polarity conditions, the two ends of a continuum. The premise being that by introducing into the nervous system a fuller continuum, we actually are activating a pathway that we can then trace and release when we feel under stress. We now know the somatic experience of stress, or the somatic experience of contraction, or the somatic experience of being hard, and we can access with greater ease the release of those conditions, very much like we see with our toddlers. They are very easy to transition from crying to laughing. We adults, we become a little more constricted and contracted, and we won't move with such an ease from one end of the continuum to another. So that's by way of just introducing where we are in the IHOW discovery journey, and a bit of a lead into today's work. What is all this bringing up? And you please share some thoughts, as we are today, more than sharing a ready-made practice, we are about to workshop live on camera to discover our way into it, and actually use that as part of demonstrating how we ease into the discovery. Please, any thoughts that come alive for you from my early opening for this exploration?
Well, what really stands out for me about the notion of living with dualities is the nature of them being a continuum. Because if you look around on the planet, in nature, there's never breathing out and breathing out and breathing out and continuing to breathe out. It always changes. And if you want to go somewhere on foot, you need to alternate between balance and movement. Left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. And everything that's in the planetary automatic life knows how to alternate in a fluid way if it's undisturbed, undamaged. But many conditions that humans have to labor under can cause these blockages or shutdowns or just a little breakage in communication, so that the electrical impulse can't jump from synapse to synapse like it's designed to do. So it's a great proposition in using the deliberate choice to reintegrate things that were never meant to be separate.
Thank you, Rita. It's very tangible and vivid and alive when you describe, because this is something we all know in our body. You can't just work the muscle harder and harder and harder. The way the fibers, the way the muscle work is, it needs its own internal breathing all the time. And one of the things I've discovered in working with people in many spaces, including in the corporate space, that there is a tendency in many of us, when we are faced with a challenge or with a greater need, we tend to go to the one muscle, and I'm using here the word muscle in a broader sense, not just bodily muscle, but behavioral muscle. We tend to load more and more and more and more to the one pathway that we discovered that supports us well, where we've been successful. And that too is wonderful, because that is a muscle that supports us, but what it does is it builds so much weight on one part of the system. It's a part of playing with integrating the two ends of the continuum, as you were describing, offers an invitation to expand the range rather than load the entire scope of weight of challenges on the one muscle, one pathway of application you use.
Lovely. I want to add, in thinking about toddlers or young people, they don't ever stop to think about that I'm growing. It's like moving forward. And they don't stop to think about, oh, if I try it this way, oh, now I'm going to try it that way. Oh, and what about this way? They don't think about that. They just do it. And there's somewhere in our society programming, and I think this is around the world actually, where we as human beings stop that playing. We stop just trying to see, how's this work? What can it do? And so if I can do this, can I do that? And then how can I modulate it to make it work the way that I want it to work? And for me, that's just natural growth. And so to have the opportunity to do that with different parts of the body, the mind, the psychology, the emotion, whatever, actually it opens that growth pattern back up and really breathes into it. And I think that kind of comparison is actually really healthy and an encouraging way to go back to something or bring forward something that's actually natural to human beings.
You just synthesized for us, Beth, maybe the most important advisory one can receive into their 40s and 50s and 60s. Because most people, the way they treat adulthood, the journey into adulthood, is narrowing and narrowing and narrowing the range. Narrowing and narrowing and narrowing the range. I don't want to be here because I've experienced pain here. I don't want to be here because I embarrassed myself once. I don't want to go. So we trim out of our experience range everything that introduced discomfort, pain, stress. And one of the ways to think about aging is people get narrower and narrower range. And one way to think about the end of life is when we lost completely the plasticity of navigating life. So the human system can no longer experience the stresses and pressures of a planetary experience. And when we lose range, we lose our capacity to live. So what we're introducing here in terms of its impact to the nervous system and also into the interpersonal, relational, social space, by expanding into a growing range, we actually are innovating new synaptic connections to as Rita described there. And if there was the grant money to lead this research about longitudinal research, the hypothesis that I would offer to research is that we could literally demonstrate that by engaging in these practices, we elongate a person's life. Number one. Number two, we improve quality of living. So yes and yes and yes. Eleni, anything you'd want to bring to the table at this point?
Just to add as well that everything is integrating together and like interconnecting together. And also if you look and detect outside in nature, there is always one wave coming in and one wave going out. And if you also detect how the human is, you will see that a lot of things are interrelated together. And this is also part of the natural workings of the body, to be able also to expand your space and not keep it narrow all the time. The more you expand the capabilities, the more freedom there is inside and outside. And the more abilities and skills are being crafted and created.
Well, you're actually inviting us, Eleni, into an esoteric appreciation of life, because when we look deeply at nature, we will see that there are two primary impulses. There is the impulse of integration, and there is the impulse of disintegration. And when we walk into the forest, we see how the tree is a demonstration of an integration, in that it takes all that's in the soil to grow and integrate what the tree becomes. And as we then look at the floor of the forest, we see all that's disintegrating, the branches and the trees that fell and are going through disintegration. So what's the message for us? The message for us is we also experience these processes in us, disintegration and integration. And the work of consciously evolving, consciously joining in the conscious part, not just the automatic part, the process of being alive, is to encourage and facilitate the dynamics of integration in how we integrate internally and how we integrate the environment around us. And this offers us a wonderful segue into now looking to journey into integrating polarities. And my sense is that we want to start with something very easy to feel and experience and access. And I'm going to ask Beth if you can offer us an introductory entry into hard and soft, tight and relaxed, contraction and expansion. How would you begin to lead us into this discovery such that we can access the two ends of this continuum and again develop a pathway where we can shift from one end of the continuum to the other?
In so much of what we need to do these days, there is a hurry up and get there. Do it now. It's got to be like this, without the play in it that actually lets you figure out what the timing of something is, what this needs to look like, or what facility you need to have in yourself to be able to match the task you're doing. It can be in work, it can be in play, it can be in family. It just happens a lot where we're going along and then it feels like there's a demand into things. And sometimes you don't know where the demand actually comes from. And the result of it, though, we feel quite easily, which is attention. And if you just take one hand, if you'll join me, and just take one hand and tighten it, and just see what does that actually cause in your body. I mean, like tighten it really tight, like you're going to hit somebody, which we're not. And then let it go. And notice if there's a corresponding place in you that you feel that tightness. Do it a couple times. When I tighten like that and I let go, I feel it in my breath. I start to hold my breath and I tighten my belly and I start to tighten my face. And that's just one hand, right? Let's do it with two hands and see what that kind of tension, because when you get pushed, a lot of times you're just feeling like you're hanging on and it has this sense of tension. And then let go. And I'm actually going to stand up and do it because I can feel better when I do that. If I take my hands and I'm going to take a breath or two to relieve some of the pressure, and I just tighten and hold, because part of it is the tightening and the holding. It arrests you, it stops you, puts you at one end of that polarity, and then let go and see what happens. Maybe your shoulders relax, or the back of your head relaxes, or all of a sudden you feel like you want to wiggle and move. Now let's add one more piece to this. And part of what I'd ask you to do is to pay attention to the polarity, the tension, and then the release of tension, because the intelligence is actually in between. So if you tighten your hands really, really tight, and then tighten your face, especially your eyes and your lips, really tight, and then let it go. And just see what that causes in your body. Do it again and see if it changes it yet again. Where you tighten your hands, you might even hold your breath while you tighten your face up, your eyes, your mouth, your jaw. And let it go. So notice what it feels like. I want to do it one more time, but choose something small in your somewhere in your life where it causes you to go into that kind of tension, and then what it would feel like to release that. So tighten your hands. You've just been asked to do something. There's a big demand, and tighten your face. It's almost a question of, is this possible? And then release. Gives you a different something to be able to work with. This tightening and releasing, tightening and releasing. And if you wanted to play with it further, you could play with different levels of tightening, not going so severe, just a little bit of tightening. But I think it would be important to bring the breathing part of it in, because that really gets stopped when we get into such tension. Rita, do you want to pick that up?
Yes. So, one appreciation about looking at polarities or experiencing polarities through breathing is it's a natural expansion, a natural contraction that is absolutely essential to life. And it goes on, even if we try to stop it, it will go on as long as we're alive. So it's far more intelligent in its way than anything that we might consciously try to do to it. So in a way, exploring it is a bit like consulting someone who's very wise and very experienced. Breathing has existed in the world way before we appeared here. So it's a bit like visiting an ancient one that works in us and through us and for us. So you might want to put your hands on your ribs. You can do breastbone, side ribs, backs of the ribs. And generally it is called the rib cage, but the cage is rather a rigid and restrictive term. You might want to think of it as a basket, a woven basket with the ribs and the cartilage and the muscles that allow a natural resilience for the lungs to expand and contract. So from a natural breath, and you can also let your arms just relax down so that you don't have to hold a rigid posture. It was just to experience where the lungs live inside the ribs. So from a natural breath, start breathing out and feel either with your hands or with your senses, feel the contraction that goes on. Breathing out, breathing out, breathing out, breathing out. And when you feel like you can't breathe out anymore, see if you can breathe out a little bit more and then hang there in that emptiness. And then allow everything to relax. And just feel how the expansion naturally follows. So following in your own time, your breath, feeling the contraction, contraction, more contraction, like you did with the fists and with your face. Just feel the lungs and the ribs contracting.
And if you do
How
get
the
dizzy,
contraction makes you feel.
if you do get dizzy for a moment, then sit down, because some people, when they breathe intensively, they get hyperventilated. So be attuned to your balances, please.
Thank you. Very, very important, so that we don't, with our exploring mind, overrule the intelligence of natural expansion and contraction. Thank you, Abid. So feeling in your own way, in your own time, just explore the contraction of the out-breath and the expansion as the lungs get filled with air. And even though you might feel that little pause and stay with that little pause between the contraction of the exhale and the expansion of the inhalation, it never really stops. So it's a continuum. It is a flow. And whenever you feel yourself being stuck in one extreme, either in the contraction or expanded out of your comfort zone so much that you don't find your way in back to home base, then one way to reconnect into the flow of it and the naturalness of the in-breath and the out-breath is just to find where it naturally happens in the breathing mechanism, and spend just a few moments just following the natural space and the rhythm of expansion and contraction as it goes on all the days of our life. And you may naturally just find the dance of it outside the lungs and notice the quality of the expanding movement and the contracting movement. But as a continuum, never locked. Don't know whether Aviv or Eleni want to pick it up from here.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Rita, and thank you, Beth, for leading us through this very natural journey of exploring through the hard and the soft, the tight and the relaxed. And I felt that it was potent and insightful, Beth, when you integrate it. That sometimes we experience something mentally or relationally or in the environment that would introduce that. So the making that somatic link, somatic connection between the interior state to an experience outside of us, and then discovering how we can shift the internal state. And oh, by the way, when we shift the internal state, it helps us also change the interrelational environmental dynamic. Because a moment ago we felt contraction and a sense of getting tight. And we now know that as we get tight and we contract, we can ease and relax. And as we do so, we literally are shifting from a sympathetic, triggered neural pathway to a parasympathetic, easing, relaxing pathway that changes the muscle tone, bypass or reroutes the neural pathway in the face from being frightened to letting the neurons of connecting and relaxing with the other person. And when we shift our inner state, we begin to shift the state of the people around us. As you said earlier, Beth, to change the world, we can follow the wisdom of Gandhi, who said, become the change you want to see in the world. Now, often that is appreciated more as a philosophical or even theological construct. What we are accessing is we are accessing the actuality of that at the very foundational neural actuality of the human orchestra, when we are able to integrate contraction and expansion and easement, bring easement into tightness, we begin to change it in all the environments around us. So thank you for this experience. Along with our website at portalsofperception.org, Portals is also available on YouTube and on all podcast platforms, as well as social media. You can become an active member and join the conversation in community events. And you can help us get the word out by liking this content and by sharing it with your friends.